Good morning, everybody. What I want to talk about today is a little bit about what's wrong with metrics, right? So we are going to hear some great stories, some great ideas. We've heard some already this morning. You're going to see some great technology. You'll probably see some products introduced through the next couple of days. But what's wrong with metrics? Let's think about that a little bit. We have an enormous amount of metrics today. Jim talked about some of them: conversion rate, percent of new visitors, overall traffic, things like that. We have a lot of different things to do, but there's some things that are missing. Today's consumer is a multi-channel consumer. They are no longer dealing with you with just one aspect of your communication capabilities. They're not just going to be a web consumer. They're not just going to be an in-store or a call center consumer. They are going to deal with you across every possible touch point you have. And we're seeing this trend continue and grow with great numbers of proving it out every quarter. In addition, they're going to be attracted to your website from many different channels as well, be it email programs, be it social media, be it search, all different kinds of ways, or good old-fashioned word of mouth where somebody told somebody something else instead of having it to post it on Facebook first. But the problem is that today's metrics, for the most part, are single channel. When we think about this, this is an e-metrics conference. Maybe it should just be a metrics conference, right? The information you're getting from your call center is usually done in a very different way than the information you're getting off of your website, which is done from a very different way than the information you're getting out of your location-based if you're a brick and mortar. Social media, same thing goes for that, and so on. So we have a situation where we have a multi-channel consumer, and yet we have single-channel metrics. And when we put those two together, unfortunately, it doesn't work out very well. And we end up with a lot of misinterpretation of data, a lot of metrics that are really wrong, a lot of misguided analysts that have great information, but they're in these silos. And the ability to put them together becomes nearly impossible. And that, to me, is one of the big problems that we need to figure out how to solve. If in 2 or 3 years we're here and it's an e-metrics conference, I think we have a problem. Because consumers are not e-consumers, they're consumers. And so we need to think about how to apply our metrics across all those channels. So let's walk through a couple of scenarios so you can understand what I mean by all this. So the first scenario, let's say that someone comes to you via maybe Facebook, via Twitter, and says, I just bought an awesome Panasonic 3D TV at Best Buy. It was on sale. Piques your interest. Well, they didn't give you a bit.ly link. So you go to Google, you type in Panasonic 3D TV Best Buy, you get some search results. Happens to be a sponsored link that shows up that really is the one that you want to click on. So you click on that sponsored link and you end up at the Best Buy site looking at the information about the Panasonic 3D TVs. Sounds like a great success, right? From an analyst perspective, an analytics perspective, the visitor came through your AdWord program. Now, the AdWord program does deserve some credit. They were that last step of that journey for that consumer made to actually get to your site. But the reality is they came because of a recommendation from a friend on a social network. That's the reality of what drove them to your website. Yet our metrics are not going to show us that. They didn't click on a bit.ly link. They came through an AdWord. So let's continue this scenario. I go to the site. I look around. I look at the various products, find a TV, actually a Samsung TV that I like. It's a 3D TV. I throw it in my shopping cart, and I abandon my shopping cart and go check out the MGO Blue site to see where Michigan's going to be playing next week in the NCAA tournament. Now what do the analytics tell me? Well, I knew before that they came through an AdWord program. I also found out later that they came because of a recommendation from a friend on a social network. Now I've learned that the item was added to a cart, was actually a different item than was recommended, and they abandoned the cart. From an e-metric standpoint, what does that tell us? It tells us it was a failure. We struck out. We brought a consumer to our website, they looked at an item, they put it in the cart, and they left. Let's follow the story a little bit further. Go to the Best Buy store, pull up the mobile app, the Best Buy mobile app, look around at the TV, find the one I'm looking for, read the product reviews on the mobile app, buy it in the store, and before you know it, I'm at home watching that 3D TV with those really cool looking glasses on. Now what do I learn from the analysis? Well, this is what I knew before. Now I actually visited a store, and if I'm using some of that cool in-store tracking technology, you may actually know how many people came in. I used an app, got some great information off of it, but I didn't purchase on that app, and ended up buying the product in a store. So I've touched a lot of different channels in this experience, and the fact is the metrics, in most cases, are going to be siloed, and I'm going to end up with a lot of bad information. Misleading information, that if I relied on that to make my decisions about where I'm going to focus my efforts, how I'm going to improve that experience for the end user, I'd make some mistakes. The visitor came through an AdWord program, but the AdWord is not what drove them to my website. The cart was abandoned, but it wasn't because I had a failure on my website or a problem with the checkout. And they used the Best Buy app, the mobile app, but they did not purchase. But it wasn't because they were remote and were trying to accomplish that and couldn't on the app. So I have a lot of data that it can be misguiding and misinterpreted unless I can piece all that information together. And in fact, we do a lot of research around different topics, social media, customer satisfaction. We have a benchmark that we've been producing for a few months called the Social Media Value Calculation. And we actually have 171 sites now being measured. And last month alone, there were over 250,000 consumers as part of that study. And we found that only 1% of those site visitors came directly from a social media referring URL. In other words, they clicked on a link that was provided in that social media site that actually drove them to one of these websites. The reality, though, was that 18% of those visitors were influenced by social media to make that visit to the site. So if you're relying on traditional siloed analytics and metrics, you're not going to be able to understand the true value of social media. And in fact, those visitors that were influenced by social media had a higher average order size than those that did not, that came through other means. So a lot of data that can help us piece this together, but if our metrics are siloed in a channel, we end up with bad metrics. Garbage in, garbage out. And it's not only that we don't have the complete story, in many cases it can actually take you down the wrong path. We also, in some research that we did with the top 40 online retailers last holiday season, these are the largest 40 US online retailers in terms of online commerce, we wanted to know what the multi-channel experience really was about. How many site visitors prefer to research online and buy in a store? And it was 22%. So these are 22% of the audience is clearly their preference is multi-channel. 3% prefer to search in the store first, research in the store first, and then buy online later. So again, we have a very interesting dynamic, and this changes quarter over quarter, year over year, as websites improve, as mobile apps improve, as social media becomes more of a player in commerce, and so on. Let's talk about another scenario. You're at work, on a website, browsing. In this case, it's looking at the Kindle on an Amazon site. Now, I know none of you would actually do that while you were at work, but it does happen once in a while, I hear. And you're looking at that Kindle, and you get ready to purchase it. You throw it in your cart. Your boss walks by, and now you're really back at work, and all of a sudden you pop up that spreadsheet and start working away. Again, I know that would never happen to any of you. So what does the analysis tell us here? The visitor browsing the products, right? They spend some time on my website, and then they abandon the site without purchasing. And let's just say that in this organization, they delete the cookies and things like that to keep their sites, their computers secure, and so it becomes an anonymous visitor from Amazon's perspective. You're at home at the end of the day, back browsing. You actually go find that Kindle that you were looking at. You buy it. Now what does the analysis tell us? Well, now they completed the purchase at home. And again, we have a lot of false information as that consumer, still in the same channel, moved from one source to another. So if you think about the number of places and the number of computers that people have access to, your websites, and what is your ability to tie them together? Is it that same visitor? Probably not. In most cases, people aren't known as the same person. And you may have your work computer, you may have a computer at home, you may have your iPhone, you may have your iPad. You may end up visiting a site from 4 or more computers in any one given day. And yet, those are very, very different metrics often and not tied together by the organizations. So when we think about that, in that visit from work, what was the real intent of that visit? In most cases, people are going to websites to research far more than they're going to actually purchase. Again, using the top 40 online retailers last holiday season, we found that 47% of the people that visited the websites, online retail websites during the holiday season, came to do research, and only 38% actually came to purchase. Now, the other 15% did other things like check on order status, look for a location, check on the latest sale, coupons, things like that. Now, these statistics change from year to year as the dynamics of the consumers change, as the websites get better, as the stores change their look and feel or shrink their number or grow their footprint. So again, we have a situation when we look at things like conversion rate, and Jim talked a little bit about conversion rate. When you look at the aggregate conversion rate of all the visitors that came to your website, what's it really telling you? Conversion rates, according to Forrester, haven't really changed in the last 7, 8 years. They're still in that 3, 4, 5% range. Yet, your websites have gotten better. Consumers are buying more online, but they're also doing more research online. And so some of the metrics that we've relied on, that industry analysts have bet their lives on, have done a lot of research around are actually very, very poorly done. And the reality of the changing consumer and the increasing number of channels. We actually created a concept we call true conversion at ForeSee Results, where we actually create conversion rate based on the intent of visit. You shouldn't be looking at 3, 4, 5% conversion rate. You should be looking at 40, 50, 60% conversion rate when people are coming to your website to make a purchase. So let's think about other kinds of sites, content sites, B2B sites, government sites, all different kind of sites. And here's a couple of quick examples thrown up. And we typically will count things like the average time on site, the number of pages they visited, and so on. And we often will even turn those into more sophisticated analytics like engagements. But what does that really tell us? So 2 examples, the exact same amount of time spent on site, the exact number of pages, same number of pages visited. Yet one is a good experience, the people actually found what they were looking for, and the other they were frustrated. So is 19 pages visited on your website good or bad? I don't know that anybody can say that for sure. Is 7 minutes and 43 seconds on your website good or bad? I don't know that anybody can say for sure. So at the end of the day, we need to know more than just the behavior that they did, how long they were there. Engagement, there's positive engagement and negative engagement. And if you're just counting how much time they're on your site and how much they're interacting with you, it's a big difference when they're writing you a comment on your feedback part of your website or sending you an email and telling you that this is the worst experience they have and they're never coming back. That's a very different kind of engagement than them saying, hey, I really had a great experience on your website and excited to recommend you to other people. So metrics can be misinterpreted, again, for all kinds of sites, financial sites, retail sites, government sites, industry sites, B2B sites, you name it. Behavior does not equal success from a consumer's perspective. We can't watch somebody and see their behavior and know whether that was a successful experience that they had. We also cannot look at the engagement they had with our website or our business and know if that was a successful experience. Waiting in line to lodge a complaint is very different than buying something at a store or waiting in line to get a recommendation from an associate at a retail environment. Yet satisfaction is really an ingredient of success. So if a consumer is satisfied, if they visited your website and it met their needs and exceeded their expectations, then it was a successful experience in their eyes. And we don't want to measure success only through the eyes of the organization. Every company has internal goals, internal objectives that they set out there. It might be the number of visitors. It might be the amount of time people are spending on site. It might be a conversion rate metric. It might be the amount of people that are coming through SEM versus SEO. We always create these organizational metrics that are key, these organizational goals. And often, our bonuses and our compensation are tied to it. And those are good, and they're never going to go away. We have them at ForeSee Results. Every company here has them, I'm sure. But the reality is what we want to do is we also want to measure success through the eyes of our consumers, because they ultimately are going to determine whether it was a good experience or bad experience. They are ultimately going to determine the experience they had, whether they're going to come back again or not, whether they're going to say something positive word of mouth, or whether they're going to say something negative and it be negative word of mouth. They're going to determine, based on their experience, whether they were successful in their eyes, whether they're going to be a long-term and loyal customer, whether you're going to own a bigger share of their wallet. So whatever metrics you use, whatever metrics you're using, at the end of the day, the behavior that they're going to do in the future is going to be based on the experience they have today and whether they were satisfied or not. The behavior that they did today is not going to be indicative of the future. So when we think about this multi-channel consumer and these single-channel metrics, what's wrong with it? Let's talk about some of the things that are wrong, and I covered some of them already. But the first is that consumers are multi-channel, and most of your metrics are not. At the end of the day, the consumer is going to be jumping from channel to channel, and now it's even getting a little more crazy and difficult to manage in that they're bringing the channels together. So you're walking through that retail store with your iPhone in your hand. You're sitting in front of that TV with a laptop in front of you, browsing other information sources. So the converging or merging of channels into one experience is actually starting to happen as well. Traditional metrics are going to tell you what has happened, but not what will happen. And ultimately, the experience that they have are going to tell you what's going to happen in the future. So satisfaction becomes very forward-looking. If I'm satisfied today, I'm going to come back tomorrow. If I made a purchase today, I'm not necessarily going to make a purchase tomorrow. It's going to depend on whether it was a good experience or not. We all have situations where we have a transaction that we complete that ultimately doesn't determine our level of success or satisfaction. Whether it's downloading the latest tax tables at tax time, if it's a horrible experience, you're still going to complete the task. Whether it's buying a gift for somebody that you have to because your wife's birthday is the next day and you haven't done anything about it yet, which does happen to me only once a year, you're going to make that transaction. You're going to complete that task, regardless of whether it was a good experience or not. But the good experience is going to determine what you do next. It's going to determine if you come back, if you're a positive word of mouth, if you're negative word of mouth, if they're going to get a bigger share of your wallet in the future. We cannot observe behavior and determine if success was a result of it. Again, we can't just watch somebody and measure satisfaction. We can watch and see what they did, but we need to understand their mind and what they're thinking and what they're likely to do in the future. Traditional metrics will ignore intent. And if you had a single-purpose website that was only for the purposes of purchasing and people couldn't check orders, they couldn't look at reviews, all they could do was complete a purchase, you could look at behavioral metrics and it would tell you a whole lot more. But if that website is multifunctional, and just about every website is these days, the information on it is not going to give you a lot of insight because you don't know what they were trying to accomplish. We need to understand the visitor's intent, and that puts a clarity, another dimension to those metrics that become very, very powerful.